As many comrades have stated before me, the achievements of Socialist Cuba are outstanding. Through the use of a planned economy and a truly participatory democracy, Socialist Cuba has been able to provide free healthcare, education and housing to its people, despite the fact that it was purposely underdeveloped for centuries by imperialism, had its resources looted and plundered, has been subjected to an illegal blockade by the United States for over 60 years, and the loss of its biggest trade partner in 1991, the collapse of the USSR, leading to the severe difficulties with Cuba's agriculture, transport and industry. Cuba, despite these setbacks, has not only been able to create a system that cares about the needs and will of the people, but through its education and revolutionary conscious building, the entire population has a high political level and is able to actively take part in the decision-making process. The collective spirit of the Cuban people can clearly be seen in the aftermath of hurricanes, when the local communities work together to rebuild homes, and can be seen in the dedication of Cuban doctors serving both in Cuba and abroad. We have to be clear that these achievements have only been possible because of Cuba's socialism and because of the guidance of the Cuban Communist Party. Even under the heel of a crippling blockade, Cuba shows us what is possible. Cuba shows us that yes, the working class is capable of overthrowing their oppressors. Yes, the working class is capable of building a new society that values people over profit, and yes, it is possible to stand up to the hawks of imperialism. But we are not the only ones who see what the working class is capable of. The ruling classes of the imperialist nations also see the example set by Socialist Cuba. They look down on this small island and they see a society built by the people for the people. They see a society where the people play an active role in discussing and changing the way their society is run. But most importantly, they see a society free from their own parasitic existence, and it terrifies them. They are terrified by what this small island has achieved, what it shows, and what it could mean for the globally oppressed. This is why the bourgeois media attack, slander and lie about Socialist Cuba in an attempt to discredit its achievements, in an attempt to keep the working class blind to what it can achieve. Due to the very existence of Socialist Cuba, we are not only able to see what is possible, we also see the sheer barbarity of the imperialist bourgeoisie. Upon being confronted with a better system, free from poverty and exploitation, they shriek in horror as they see that they will no longer be able to live off the backs of the workers. Instead of seeing this system of equality and emancipation, they perceive it as a pure nightmare and a threat. This is why the imperialist US maintains its blockade against the people of Cuba, in an attempt to snuff out this symbol of hope and bring the people back under the oppression of capitalism. As communists, it is our duty to make the fears of the bourgeoisie a reality. It is our duty to, using the example of Cuba, show the working class that another world is possible. This is why we must stand in solidarity with Socialist Cuba and defend it from the slander and lies of the media. The best way we can aid Cuba is by building an anti-imperialist, working class, communist movement in this country, going out onto the streets and upholding the banner of Cuban socialism. Imagine what it would mean, not just for the people of Cuba, but for the oppressed people of the world, if Britain, the oldest imperialist country, had its own working class awakening. Join us in fighting to build the better world that Cuba shows us possible. Viva Cuba!
Viva Cuba! Viva Cuba! Viva Cuba! Hands off Cuba! Hands off Cuba! Hands off Cuba! Hands off Cuba! Okay, next we are going to hear from Billy.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Lots of people like to compare Britain and Cuba, or Cuba with other capitalist nations. But the reality is, there is no comparison. They are two completely, fundamentally different societies with completely opposing principles. Britain is set up and run in the interests of capitalism, and Cuba is run in the interest of providing every human on the planet with decent living conditions. When we talk about Britain, and we talk about what Britain exports to the world. What does Britain export to the world? Britain exports weapons to the sum of over 10 billion pounds a year. What does Cuba export? They support medical personnel to the sum of over 55,000 people each year to places where there is no medicine, where there is no doctors. Even in developed Europe, Cuban doctors go to support human beings across the planet. When Britain sends troops across the world, their goal is to oppress and to plunder and to steal their resources. When Cuba sends troops across the world, their goal is to support national liberation movements and fight against imperialism. The British state supported racist apartheid. The Cuban state fought alongside Angolan forces against the South African apartheid state to help destroy apartheid in South Africa. In Britain, if you'd like a university education, you'll most probably end up in thousands and thousands of pounds worth of debt, and you won't even get a job at the end of it. In Cuba, everyone has access to free education at every level, and when you finish your degree in Cuba, you're guaranteed a job by the state, and that is to repay the services that the state has provided in you by giving you free education. When we talk about education, we can't forget what Cuba does at the Cuban School of Medicine, where they educate poor students from around the world to study medicine from Britain and America and poor places all across the world, where students would never have the opportunity to afford to study, to get a degree. Cuba invites these students from across the world to come and study medicine for free on one condition. The condition is that they go back to their own countries and practice medicine to people who need it most. When we talk about housing, in Britain, you only have to walk 2 minutes down the street to see about 100 homeless people. Thousands and thousands of homeless people sleep rough on the streets of Britain every single night. In Cuba, there are no homeless people. Yep. In Cuba, you have no homeless people whatsoever. That's not because they have an abundance of homes in Cuba. Quite the opposite. In Cuba, they organise society to make sure that everybody has a home. In Britain, we have over 600,000 empty homes, which is enough to house every homeless family twice. Why are these people not housed? Because in Britain and under capitalism, housing isn't built or used for human need. The point of housing in a capitalist country is for a source of profit. In Cuba, when a house is built to house someone. In Britain, when a house is built to line the pockets of the already wealthy. The fundamental point is these are two very different kinds of society, and I know which society I would rather live in and what I believe is right and what I believe that we should all fight for. We should fight for a society which puts the interests of human beings ahead of the interests of profit. We should fight for a society which puts healthcare and medicine